I always loved the hush the tide brings after midnight, when the salt air thickens and every beam of moonlight feels like a whisper from the ocean floor. That night, the beach house perched on the edge of Briar Cove looked almost tender, its old cedar boards silvered by the lunar glow, windows blinking with the last reflections of a dying bonfire. I had inherited it from an aunt I barely remembered, a woman rumored to have drowned in the cove after locking herself inside the very room where I unpacked in silence, letting the slow creak of the floorboards fill the gaps where a radio or idle chatter should have been. There was power, but I refused to turn on the lights. I wanted the moon to guide me, wanted the place to reveal its shape on its own terms, like a beast sniffing a new handler. From the hallway, the tide sounded like breathing, in and out. Gentle, enormous, patient, the upstairs corridor was lined with old photographs, all of them half faded, faces blurred by moisture. Yet every single one still had eyes that gleamed as if wet. Some eyes were amused, others mournful, but all of them, I swear, followed as I passed. I laughed at myself, easy prey to suggestion, city nerves jangling in rural dark. Still, I could not shake the intuition that the house was offering a test, look away and be permitted ignorance, or stare back and acknowledge the invitation buried in the walls. I chose to stare. At the final frame, I stopped. The photograph showed a summer gathering on the porch in 1956. Sunburned relatives raised lemonade glasses to the lens. In the background, pressed against the railing, was my aunt. Her smile was too wide, her posture slightly off, as though someone unseen was gripping her shoulders from behind. The negative space around her seemed denser, darker. I ran a thumb over the glass. For a moment, the surface felt warm as though the image itself remembered the sun that had once bathed it. A floorboard groaned behind me. Turning, I saw nothing but the stretching dark. The air smelled older suddenly, heavy with something metallic and sweet. I told myself it was the seaweed, baking in the midday sun, lingering even after dusk. Yet the scent was unmistakably like blood. I slept in the attic because the will said that was where she would have wanted me. The attic's single window faced the water, a perfect round porthole onto the moonlit black. Gull feathers littered the corners, and a lone rocking chair sat in the center facing the window. On the floor, chalk marks shaped an enormous circle crowded with unfamiliar sigils. The dust told me the circle had not been disturbed for decades, yet the chalk lines were fresh and crisp, as though drawn minutes ago. My breath clouded the air, but it felt like someone else's lungs doing the work. Still, I crossed the boundary, rolled my sleeping bag beside the chair, and settled in. Outside, the tide whispered up the shore, then drew back again and again, like the breath of a story waiting to be told. I awoke at 3:13 in the morning to the soft scrape of the rocking chair moving back and forth in slow arcs. I had not rocked it. The house felt smaller, its angles wrong, as if someone had compressed it slightly while I was unconscious. The moon was gone, replaced by bruised clouds that hung low, luminous from within. There was a shape in the chair. Only a silhouette, edges pulsing like heat waves above asphalt. Long hair floated free, weightless as seagrass in deep water. I could hear no breathing, but I could hear a low hum, one note held perfectly, the way a conch shell will echo your own blood. My first thought was that I was dreaming, yet I tasted the dust in my mouth and felt the damp chill in my bones. Dreams rarely come with such petty discomforts. I tried to stand. The moment my shoulders left the sleeping bag, the humming ceased. The figure leaned forward. Two pale hands settled on the arms of the chair, fingers too long, joints swollen like marbles beneath parchment skin. She cocked her head, and I saw that her hair was not hair at all, but strands of glistening kelp dripping seawater onto the wood. Each droplet hit with the sound of a clock ticking. I whispered my aunt's name. The attic answered by vibrating, a deep subterranean tremor that rattled the window. Outside, the wind rose, but it blew inland from the sea, carrying the stench of rotting fish and something fouler beneath. The figure lifted a hand and pointed to the circle on the floor. The chalk lines glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. When a pulse missed a beat, I felt my heart stumble to catch up. The message was clear. Leave the circle and the rhythm breaks for good. So I obeyed, crawling backward until my spine met the far wall. The figure relaxed, sinking deeper into the chair. The rocking resumed, and with every creak, memories, not mine, flared inside my head. A girl running barefoot on the beach at dawn. A hidden cove dripping crimson in twilight. A mouth full of seawater and song. Pain twisted each vision, searing my nerves, and then retreated. I understood then why my aunt had drowned with the doors locked from the inside. Some bargains require blood and salt and isolation. Some bargains ask that the last witness become the next offer. I must have passed out. When I opened my eyes, dawn's first light seeped through the window, revealing the chair empty, the chalk faded. My sleeping bag was soaked, as though I dragged it from the waves. Every photograph downstairs had shifted. Where joyful faces once posed, each image now showed only the beach house itself, windows gaping like open jaws. The tide was at its lowest when I stumbled outside, yet the sand beneath the porch steps squirmed with eels that left no trail. I wanted to flee, but the will reminded me. The property was mine. The story was mine. Whatever bargain my aunt had struck now traced my veins. The second night I stayed awake, lamps blazing, radio blaring static. There were no stations this far out. At 2 a.m, the lamps died together. The radio clicked off mid-hiss. No power outage could explain synchronized failure of battery lanterns. In the sudden dark, the house exhaled. Every door unlatched simultaneously, hinges singing short metallic notes as they drifted ajar. I saw footprints appear in the dust, wet and narrow, leading from the kitchen to the stairwell, one deliberate step after another. I followed because the alternative was worse, letting them approach unseen. The footprints glimmered faintly, as though filled with starlight. They climbed the stairs, paused at the landing where my aunt's portrait once hung. Now only a stain remained, and continued to the attic door. When I opened it, the attic was luminous. Moonlight poured though a window it should have faced inland, yet now framed a horizonless sea. At its center floated the house itself, adrift, lights flickering like desperate fireflies. From somewhere far below, the tide began to chant. It used my name as the refrain. I do not remember closing the door, yet I found myself back in the hallway, hands bleeding crescent moons where my nails dug into my palms. The footprints had vanished. The doors were shut. But from within every room came the same soft rocking, rhythmically perfect, as though dozens of chairs moved in eerie unison. Something occurs to me now, writing this by the failing light of dawn. Number 3. Perhaps the house is not haunted by the dead, but by the living moments they could not bear to surrender. Perhaps these memories wander the halls, seeking a warm body to persuade into reenactment, so the loop can tighten and snap. I can feel their weight pressing behind my eyes, urging me to remember scenes that never belonged to me. I swore I would leave today. Then the tide rolled in and did not retreat. Sea foam flooded the path, and the gulls gathered along the shingles, heads cocked, waiting like jury birds. The water surrounds the foundation now, ankle deep and crawling higher. I taste salt in every breath. The house rocks gently, the way a boat does when it begins to accept the convenience of sinking instead of the labor of a float. I found the rocking chair in the living room this time, though I had seen it burn in the fireplace Less than an hour earlier. The kelp hair draped over the backrest, dripping. It waits for me to sit. The tide outside hums the same single note, a cosmic dial tone. I wish I could say I am fighting. Yet the air here is thick with intimidation and promise. The bargain stands. Take the chair, keep the memory alive, and maybe the water will stop at the sill. Maybe tomorrow the tide will remember to ebb, but if I resist, the house and whatever breathes through its boarded lungs will drag me to the black sandbar beneath the cove where my aunt's bones jangle like wind chimes in the current. And there is a part of me, a terrible, truthful part, that wants to see how her story ends. The rocking chair creaks. The tide sings. I stand at the threshold and feel the wet board soften like flesh beneath my feet. Somewhere behind me a photograph snaps its shutter, capturing this moment for the next inheritor. I give in. I sit, and the wood shivers beneath my weight, as though it remembers every spine that ever pressed against it. The circle blazes back to life, chalk seams searing white-hot, sewing the floorboards together with lines of ghostlight. Outside, the water slaps the siding in slow applause. The house has drifted free of land. I feel it in the way gravity turns liquid beneath me, how the walls sway with the suggestion of an unseen swell. A whisper threads through the rafters, not words, but impressions salt-scorched summers. Hidden letters in bottles that never reached shore. A boy who vanished between two waves and returned 2 decades later, wearing the face of an aging fisherman. Each memory hovers, waiting for adoption. When I refuse, they splinter, embedding. Their shards in the beams above, glowing like angry stars. The chair tilts me backward until I stare straight up at the peak of the roof. The boards dissolve into sky, and I watch clouds reel by in impossible haste, day rolling into night, night bleeding back into day. Time here is malleable. The house needs it, stretches it, bakes it into new shapes. I see versions of myself flicker across the attic, one huddled child, one stoic adult, one frantic old man, all inhabiting the same second, all trapped in converging orbits around the chair. When the chair rights itself, the visions collapse, leaving only me, but I'm hollowed by their echoes. My palms now bear scars I don't remember earning, each shaped like a sea creature, a spiral shell, a starfish, a barbed stingray tail. The cuts leak brine instead of blood. Somewhere below, a door slams. Footsteps tramp through waterlogged halls. Voices rise, familiar yet twisted, like family calling from behind frosted glass. They chant a litany of my failures' missed calls. Broken vows, every cruel sentence muttered in exhaustion. And with every accusation, the house shudders nearer to bursting. Guilt is its favorite solvent. I force myself from the chair. The floor is slick, the chalk circles steaming. Every step draws a hiss, as if the boards resent liberation. Yet the moment I cross the threshold, silence swallows the attic. The voices retreat, leaving an almost amiable quiet. Downstairs, the living room is drowned to the knees. Furniture floats gently, revolving in slow waltzes. A sofa cushion brushes. My thigh spitting clams onto the hardwood. The air smells of decay and sweetgrass. Farther inside, the dining table remains inexplicably dry, candles lit, flames steady despite the suffocating damp. Plates hold dinners petrified into stone. At the head chair sits the silhouette my aunt, maybe, or the house itself wearing. Her shaped fork poised, waiting for the blessing. I deliver none. The head turns anyway, neck cracking like ice breaking off a glacier. I see no face, only darkness striped with pale ripples, as though I'm looking through her at the depths beyond. She stands, knees bending in all the wrong directions, and the table collapses, drowned by her shadow. The wave that follows drives me into the hallway, slamming the front door shut behind me, though I never touched the knob. Water now owns the first floor entirely, swirling with debris that shouldn't exist, postcards from decades ago, a sailor's cap crusted with barnacles, a child's sandcastle bucket, gnawed through by teeth too large for any fish. Each object radiates a memory, and when they bump my leg, I feel a jolt of foreign childhood, heartbreak, triumph, parasite emotions hungry for hosts. I escape to the porch, which remains level, a serene stage suspended above the storm. The sea stretches below, infinite and indifferent, stars gleaming deep within it, as if the sky and water have switched places. The air hums with the borderless silence of being far from anything that can save you. In that quiet, a lifeboat bumps. The railing. It is the old wooden dinghy from the photograph, precisely as it appeared the summer of 1956, even down to the carved initials on the prow. LG, my aunt's. The rope securing it to the post is dry. The seat inside bears a folded blanket and a journal whose cover glows faintly with the same chalk sigils. The choice is obvious. Board the boat, drift into the impossible horizon, or stay and complete. The cycle. But the house knows my mind. Before I can decide, the rocking chair scrapes across the porch and plants itself inside the dinghy. The kelp hair writhes like eager tentacles. The chair tilts invitingly. I step back. The porch floor flexes, like lung tissue, exhaling salt spray through the gaps. Behind me, glass shatters in every window simultaneously, shards spinning outward in a glittering swarm that reassembles midder into translucent birds. They circle my head, wings slicing wind with the hiss of knives. When they screech, the sound is my own voice pleading for mercy. I run. Not into the house, not into the boat, but along the railing in hopes of finding stairs to the beach, yet the stairs are gone, swallowed by the rising tide. I dash the length of the porch until I reach a door. I do not remember. A cellar hatch, built into the decking. It yawns open at my approach, warm light spilling from below, carrying the scent of sun-baked driftwood and fresh lily out of place in this briny nightmare. Rung by rung, I descend until I stand in a basement that cannot exist. The house was never built with one. Sand covers the floor in neat dunes. The walls are mirrors reflecting a beach at sunrise. In each mirror, I see a figure distant on the sand, walking toward the water. Some versions are me, others complete strangers, yet all share the same desolate resolve. None look back. At the center of the room, a single seashell rests atop a pedestal. It is enormous, pearly, throbbing with an inner pulse. Instinct tells me to place my ear against it, and when I do, the shell doesn't offer ocean sounds. It plays my life in rewind, each year peeling away until I am unborn, until there is only the concept of me, swirling as potential within the waters. Cradle. A gentle voice asks, "Do you wish to start again where the tide first touched the sand?" The offer is seductive, a chance to reset, to scrub the future of the mistakes the house eagerly catalogs. But I recall the lesson ringing through every echo of this night. Nothing given by the sea comes without undertow. I straighten, shell slipping from my hands. It shatters on the floor, spilling ink-dark water that crawls toward the mirrors. One by one they fill, glass becoming liquid. The reflected horizons spill out, transforming the basement into an endless beach looping back on itself. I stand on sand that repeats forever, my footprints pursuing themselves ahead of me. The tide edges closer, each wave bringing a chorus of voices, those who accepted the chair, those who boarded the boat, those who shattered the shell. They beg, warn, laugh, sing. Their languages overlap, a tapestry of regret woven fine as spider silk. I do the only thing left. I scream the word no until my throat tears. The sound ripples through the mirrored sky above, and fractures it. Cracks radiate outward, reality spider webbing. Through the gaps, I glimpse the living room lamp, the attic porthole, the porch railing pieces of the house suspended in void. The basement is not a basement. It is the memory of a possibility, and possibilities break when confronted with certainty. I choose certainty. I choose to burn the house, drown the chair, erase the path for whoever would follow. With shattered shell fragments slicing my palms, I climb back into the true hallway. Water greets me like a savage lover. Furniture collides as currents twist through rooms, now unrecognizable fishbowls. Haul kerosene from the storm shed. When did the shed appear? And slash the cans open, letting the slick perfume bloom across the floodwater. Lightning stutters. Outside, painting the world in harsh negatives. The silhouette of my aunt stands in each flash, sometimes on the stairs, sometimes at the porch, sometimes inches behind me. She says nothing, but each time her head tilts farther, vertebrae snapping. Like wet twigs, the matchbook is from a seaside bar long shuttered. I flick one alight. The flame is tiny, intimate, like the first light of a secret told under blankets. I whisper an apology to the memories, the ghosts, the truths too heavy to carry further. Then I let the match drop. Fire kisses the kerosene. With voracious love, blooming into a tapestry of oranges that devours the water, the walls, the years. The house howls hollow protest. Outside, thunder applauds. Yet burning wood does not smell like this. The odor is sweet as honey and wrong as sulfur. A promise that what burns is not mere timber, but the binding threads between moments. The roaring flame is rewriting time, severing cause from effect. I feel the years pulling apart inside me, seams, tearing, leaving only the raw heartbeat of now. When the roof gives way, stars tumble through, too close, too bright. They streak into the fire and dissolve like salt in boiling soup. The rocking chair sits in the center, untouched, flames bowing around it as though commanded. Kelp hair combusts in silent blue. I step toward it one final time, armed with nothing but the emptiness where fear used to be. The chair rocks faster, as if to claim the only power left, endurance. I grab its arm. The wood is cool. I wrench it sideways. The leg snaps. The chair collapses, finally mortal. A wind tears through the skeleton house, sucking the smoke up to the night. Rain follows, cold and unforgiving, hissing against ember and bone. Steam veils the aftermath. Dawn finds me standing ankle-deep in ash, the foundation smoldering beneath. Soft rain. The sea has retreated entirely, horizon distant, innocent. Charred beams jut like black ribs from the sand. No trace of the chair remains. No photographs. No footprints. Only me, scarred, salted, free. So why, at the edge of my hearing, do I catch the faintest creak of rocking wood, carried on the morning breeze? And then I realize it was never the chair that haunted the house. It was the house haunting the chair, the cove haunting the house, the ocean haunting the cove, and the silence haunting the ocean. A nesting doll of hungers, each swallowing. The next, I walk away across the smoking sand, promising myself that memory will end here, that I will speak no word of this night. Yet promises are stories, and stories crave a house to echo in. Somewhere, a doorway waits, patient as tide. Always. I left the beach house at dawn, soaked and trembling, sure I had ended it. I thought the fire had severed the curse. I thought. The chair was gone, the house turned to ash, and whatever hunger it carried had finally burned with it. I walked barefoot along the cliffside road for miles, until I reached the nearest village. The locals met me with quiet eyes and tighter lips. When I asked for help, one man handed me a towel and said nothing. When I mentioned Briar Cove, an old, Woman dropped her groceries and whispered something under her breath that sounded like a prayer or a warning dot at the inn. The woman behind the desk didn't ask many questions, just stared at me as if she recognized a shadow clinging to my shoulders. "You saw the chair, didn't you?" she asked, not blinking. I froze. She handed me the room key and said nothing else. That night, I dreamed of the house. It was standing again. Whole, proud, undisturbed. The fire had never happened. In the dream. I was back inside it, but this time, I wasn't alone. The photographs on the walls were breathing. The floorboards were whispering my name in voices of relatives I never met. In the attic, the rocking chair moved gently back and forth, cradling something that wore my mother's face. When I woke up, my hands were coated in sand. There was a crack in the wall of the inn room, dripping salt water. By noon, I was walking back. I didn't choose to. My body moved on its own. Something deeper than thought or fear was pulling me back like a tide that had only let me go, so I'd understand how far gone I really was. When I reached the edge of Briar Cove, my legs nearly gave out. The house was standing. Intact. Perfect. As though I had never touched it, as if it had never burned. No smoke, no ash, no damage. It even looked cleaner, but the sea had risen. Now, it lapped against the porch steps, and the sand around the house was gone. The ocean had claimed it, wrapped its arms around the foundation, and wouldn't let go. I should have run. Every cell in my body screamed to turn back, to go inland, and never speak of this place again. But fear is no match for curiosity, especially when it's coated in guilt. The door opened before I touched it. Inside, silence reigned, not the peaceful kind, the kind that fills your ears like static underwater. It muffled even my heartbeat. The photos on the wall had changed. Now, they showed me in places I'd never been. Laughing beside people I didn't know. Holding a baby I never fathered. Standing on a beach I'd never walked. My life rewritten in frames. They weren't trying to scare me this time. They were trying to convince me, that this was my life, that I belonged here. I passed the hallway mirror and stopped. There was no reflection, only the sea, rolling, calm, and infinite. But something stirred beneath the waves. A shape, a movement. A single massive eye slowly rising just beneath the surface of the water. I felt it looking straight at me. I flinched, blinked, but the mirror kept showing it. Ran. Back to the attic. The place where it all started. The rocking chair was there. Brand new. Rebuilt. As if it had never burned. But it wasn't. Empty. She was sitting in it again. The woman with hair like seaweed. Only this time she spoke. "You came back too soon," she said. Her voice didn't come from her mouth. It came from everywhere. From the beams, from the wind, from the water running through the pipes. "You didn't finish what you started." "I ended it," I said, my throat tight. "You ended nothing," she whispered, rocking gently. "You only paused the memory. The house rebuilds. It always rebuilds." I felt dizzy, like I was being rewritten. She pointed to the wall. There was a new door. I swear it hadn't been there yesterday. Narrow, made of thick frosted glass, carved with symbols that burned just faintly with a cold white glow. Etched across. The top was my mother's name. No handle. "Just light. Go," the woman said. "Go where?" Her smile was neither cruel nor kind. It was infinite, to the part of you that wants this. I stepped forward. The glass felt warm. I pressed my hand to it, and the door opened inward. What I saw didn't make sense. Couldn't. There was an ocean inside. Not metaphorical. Not illusion. Real ocean. Endless. Rolling gently. Lit by an inner moon that did not exist in any sky. And floating on that sea was another house. The same house. A perfect mirror. And inside that house was me dot and me dot and me dot versions of myself in every window, in every room, different lives, some older, some younger, some dead. One version of me was sitting at a table with a father I never had dot. Another version was holding hands with a lover I've never met. Children were laughing in the yard. My children, ones I never raised. I was watching a version of the life I used to dream of. It was everything I wanted, everything I thought I lost. And then I saw her dot. My mother dot. Alive, dot. Healthy, dot. Smiling, dot. She waved, dot. My chest shattered. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to believe. But then she spoke, not out loud dot, but inside me. Stay. It was soft, sweet, real. I almost did, but I remembered what the house was dot. A trap, not built of wood, but of memory dot. Of desire dot. Of guilt, of regret. I stepped back. No, I said. The glass door snapped shut like a scream. The attic went black. I collapsed dot, and when I woke, I was not in the attic anymore. I was in the sand, on the beach dot. Alone dot. The house was gone. Nothing remained dot. No ruins, no fire, not even a foundation dot. Just footprints leading to where I lay, and another set larger, wetter, leading back into the sea. I should have stayed away. I told myself I would. I promised. I made every excuse, swore it off like a bad addiction. But the thing about places like that house, about things like what happened there, is they don't leave just because you do. They plant themselves in you, and they wait dot. It started small. At first, it was just dreams. Dreams of the ocean rising and pulling me under, but not drowning me, showing me. The sea beneath the sea, cities sunken, churches flooded, a chair made of coral in the center of it all, waiting for someone to claim it. And each night, I got closer dot. Then came the smell dot. Salt dot. Rotting wood. Seaweed so pungent, it burned the back of my throat. I'd wake up drenched in sweat or seawater. I couldn't tell. My bed would be soaked. My clothes would stick to my skin like they'd been submerged. And always, I'd hear the faint creak of a rocking chair, somewhere just outside the walls. I moved 3 times dot. It followed me every time. Threw away the clothes I wore in the house. Burned the journal. Deleted every file and photo. And yet, when I checked my phone one night, I found a new image in my gallery dot. It was me dot. Sitting in the attic dot. Smiling dot. Behind me. The chair rocked slowly. I hadn't taken that picture. I hadn't been back. But the house, whatever it is, had reached through dot. By the 4th week. The dreams weren't dreams anymore. I'd wake up standing, in the hallway, in the bathtub, on the porch. Always soaked, always cold. One time, I woke up at the edge of the beach with no memory of how I got there. Another time, I woke up on a bench in a city I hadn't visited in years. Sand filled my shoes, my pockets, my lungs. I wasn't just haunted. I was unraveling. And then came the letter dot. No postmark dot. No return address. Just a piece of aged paper, folded. 3 times dot. The ink was wet. Somehow, still drying dot. And the handwriting. It was mine dot. It read, "You left the chair too soon. Finish what she started." That night, I didn't sleep. I waited for the sun to rise, and I drove back to Briar Cove. The road looked unfamiliar, warped by memory. The trees leaned inward. The wind blew the wrong way. And as I turned the final bend, the house stood exactly as before, not rebuilt dot. Not restored dot. Unchanged dot. As if time itself had reattached it to the shoreline. The beach had vanished. Waves licked the porch now. The ocean had claimed it fully. And still, the porch light was on, like it was waiting for me. Stood at the gate for what felt like hours. My body wouldn't move. My legs were filled with lead. But my hands wanted the door. When I finally crossed the threshold, the house breathed me in. The air was thick, humid, electric. Every board creaked underfoot like it remembered me. The portraits were back, but this time they were moving. Not like a video, not like memory. They showed me things I'd never seen, or things I'd forgotten. I saw myself as a child, staring out at the ocean, whispering secrets to waves. I saw myself digging something up in the sand, an object I don't remember burying. I saw my aunt rocking slowly, lips moving but no sound, over and over again, like a loop. I followed the creaks dot upstairs. The attic door was open. Inside, the rocking chair sat still, not moving. The circle beneath it glowed faintly, like something barely breathing. I didn't sit. Not yet. I walked past it, toward the far wall, the one with no window. But now there was one, a round, perfect porthole, revealing the sea. But the sea wasn't outside, it was inside, rolling up against the window. And beneath its surface, shapes, writhed, tentacles, limbs, bodies. Things I didn't have names for. They weren't watching me, exactly. They were waiting, like the house was, like the chair was. Behind me, it creaked. But this time, not rocking. It tilted slightly. Toward me. As if inviting. I stepped back. But my foot didn't land. There was no floor. Only water. Freezing. Black. I plunged into it, the attic vanishing above me. The chair sinking alongside, slowly. The pressure built fast, crushing. Immense, and yet I could still breathe. My lungs filled with salt and foam and something older than breath. Down I went, past shipwrecks. Past bones, past doorways carved, into coral. Until I reached it. The room. Stone. Perfect. At its center, a chair made of bone and shell and rope. Waiting. She stood beside it. Hair floating like seaweed, eyes like broken mirrors. "You're ready now," she said. "No," I choked. "I'm not, but you came back." She circled me. "You crossed the threshold again. You left the world of breath. You remembered." "I want to leave," I whispered. "You can." A pause, but not alone. She reached into the water and pulled up a mirror. It showed me sitting in the attic, smiling, still. "You already stayed," she said. Then she offered me a second mirror. In it, I stood at the porch of the house, waving goodbye to no one. Backpack slung over my shoulder, never returning. "You can still be that," she said, "but only if you choose." The water began to spin. Currents wrapped around us. And I realized this wasn't about ghosts, curses. This was about choice. About memory. About surrender. The chair behind her pulsed with light, and the attic above began to rise. Toward me again. Two paths. Two endings. One final breath. The ocean twisted upward. Time was splitting. Above me, the attic bloomed back into view. Boards groaning in slow return. Light pouring from the window, like an invitation I was never meant to see again. Below me, the deep sang. The shell throne pulsed, and her voice, calm and final, echoed through my ribs. Stay, and the pain ends. Go, and the cycle begins again. It sounded like compassion, but there was something underneath it. Fatigue. The kind you hear in someone who's offered the same choice for centuries and has seen it answered wrong every time. Looked up. The attic flickered. The photograph of my mother blinked in and out of existence, as though struggling to stay tethered. The rocking chair rocked once, then stopped. A stillness fell over everything. A dangerous stillness, like breath held too long. I kicked upward. The current fought me. My limbs burned. The voices below began to chant, dozens of voices now. Hundreds maybe, each one echoing versions of me. Mocking, pleading, weeping. Don't. Lie to yourself. You belong here. This is peace. This is real. Everything else is drowning. I didn't listen, because in that moment, I remembered something I'd tried to forget. I remembered my aunt's face, not in fear, not as the shadow in the chair, but in the last real photograph of her, the one tucked in the back of a forgotten drawer, the one where she looked alive. Alive and afraid, not of the house, not of the sea, of herself, of what she was becoming. And then I understood. She hadn't drowned. She'd fled. She'd chosen to fall into the ocean to escape what the chair was making of her. She hadn't been trapped. She had broken the pattern. I rose faster. The attic pulled me like a magnet. As I burst through the window of memory and back into wood and shadow. I collapsed onto the floor, soaked, shaking, alive. The chair was empty. Attic was still, but outside, the tide had risen again. The water lapped at the porch. The sky churned with clouds shaped like things with too many limbs. I stood, and the house reacted. Not violently, not with rage, but with disappointment. The photographs melted from the walls. The floorboards softened under my feet. The scent of salt grew sharp, acidic, clawing into my sinuses like bleach. The stairs down groaned under my weight, as if each step was pulling nails from a coffin. When I reached the front room, the entire left wall was gone. It opened directly. Into the sea. No transition. No warning. Just house. And then ocean. And on the horizon, a figure stood, on the water. Not floating, not supported. Standing. She was tall now. Not the frail silhouette I'd seen. Her arms were made of shadow and seaweed. Her hair like tentacles that reached the clouds. Her face was mine, a version of me that had stayed. The house groaned. She lifted one hand, and with a flick of her fingers, the room collapsed. Floorboards tore upward. Furniture flew. Water poured through like veins bursting under pressure. I ran through the back hallway, through a door that hadn't existed before. A library now. Endless bookshelves, all filled with journals. All labeled with my name. And as I passed them, the titles read not like books, but like choices. The year you didn't leave. The day you gave up. The second you believed it was real. Each spine burned when I touched it. The last one on the shelf was open. Blank. Waiting. Behind. Me. Footsteps. Not water. Not shadow. Boots. Heavy. Slow. They echoed with authority. I didn't turn around. I ran through a hall of mirrors now, each pane reflecting a different moment I didn't live. One showed me happy. One showed me monstrous. One showed me staring back at myself with no eyes. I smashed it, and as the glass cracked, the entire hallway bent inward, like lungs exhaling their last breath. I found a door. I don't know how. I didn't open it. It opened for me. I fell into what once was the kitchen, now twisted. Upside down. Chairs on the ceiling. Water flowing from beneath the stove. On the counter, a single note, scrawled in sea salt ink. Final offer. The air turned. Heavy. And from the darkness, the voice returned. Not hers. Mine. My own voice. But broken. Desperate. You can go. You can forget. You can have your life back. The door ahead swung open, revealing a road. My car. My old apartment. A smell I hadn't felt in months. Coffee, books, earth. The real world. But behind me, the creak returned. The chair. Always. The chair. This time. It was at the center of the room again. Empty. But dripping. Black water pooled beneath it, seeping through the boards. And above it, something began to take shape. A rib cage. A spine. A face. Mine. But not the version of me that stayed. The version that didn't fight. The chair pulsed dot, so did the water dot, and then, in perfect synchronicity, the room began to close. Not collapse dot close dot, like a throat swallowing. I turned toward the open door. I ran, and the house roared. The scream wasn't sound, it was gravity. Everything twisted. The sea imploded upward. The chair howled. My other self reached for me, arms stretching longer than physics should allow. I crossed the threshold. The moment my foot hit the road solid, dry, real everything behind me. Folded. Folded like paper. Folded. Like a memory you're trying to forget. Folded like the house was never there. And at WASN single quotes T, dot gone, dow, tide dot no porch, dot no sea, dot just me, dot standing on the edge of a cliff that looked out onto a calm. Shoreline dot no house, dot no curse, dot no chair. Fell to my knees. I cried. For too long. For everything. But especially for the part of me that didn't make it out. Because it's true what they say. You never come back the same dot, and sometimes you don't come back alone. I told myself I was free, that I had escaped, that whatever lived in that house, or whatever the house had become, had been left behind with the ocean and the night. But freedom is not forgetting, and forgetting is not healing. I tried to rebuild my life. I got a new apartment, took a job that didn't ask questions, cut off anyone who knew anything about me before Briar Cove. The first few weeks were quiet, blissfully quiet. Too quiet. I'd sit at my desk, eat my meals, lie in bed staring at the ceiling fan, and wonder, was it real? But deep down, I knew the answer. It had never stopped being real. Not even for a second dot. It started with the noise dot faint dot, like wood creaking. Nothing unusual dot, except it wasn't coming from my floors. Dot, it was coming from inside the walls dot. Then came the smell dot salt. Mold. Wet. Timber dot no windows open. No leaks, but the scent lingered clinging to my shirts, my pillows, my skin. Then, one night, I came home late, and the chair was there dot not the same one, but close. Too close. A rocking chair I never bought, sitting in the corner of the living room, motionless, facing the wall. I stood in the doorway for 10 minutes, unmoving, unable to breathe. When I finally found the courage to approach, it was empty, but warm dot, as if someone had just risen from it. I threw it out, dragged it to the alley myself, watched the garbage truck take it away the next morning. 2 days later, it was back dot same corner, dot same stillness, dot same warmth. This time, it rocked once when I entered the room. Just once. I left the apartment that night. I didn't sleep. I checked into a hotel. Took nothing with me dot. And still, at 3:13 a.m., I heard the creak dot. It wasn't just a sound anymore dot. It was a call. A rhythm. A pattern. Like waves dot like breath. And I understood then what no one ever had the words to say. You don't leave the house. You become it dot. It waits dot. It wears your shape dot. It follows the memory of you dot. And every version of you that ever stepped inside stays dot. So I stopped running dot. Not because I gave up. Because I needed to understand what it wanted. Why? It shows me dot. I returned to Briar Cove. No map dot, no GPS. Just instinct. I found the shoreline again empty. Windless. Clean. Not a footprint in sight. But I knew where to dig. I brought a shovel. And when I dug where the porch used to be, I hit something hard dot wood dot old dot salt dash Eden dot. I kept digging. And after 6 feet, I found the chair dot buried dot upright dot waiting dot, and behind it, a door dot no wall dot no house. Just a door buried in sand, covered in symbols I no longer feared. I opened it dot and stepped in dot not into the house, into the memory of it dot. It formed around me like fog. Every room appeared only when I remembered it. The hallways, twisted in sync with my thoughts. The attic pulsed like a heartbeat I'd carried too long. And there, at the center of it all, was her Dot the woman, the seaweed hair, the eyes of mirrors. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She stepped aside, and there it was, the original chair, not remade, not restored Dot the one that started it, and above it, suspended in the rafters, hundreds of silhouettes hung like puppets, each one a version of me, paused in different choices, some smiling, some crying, some screaming silently into the wood. I understood then, every time I sat, every time I entered, every time I remembered. A piece of me stayed, and I was no longer whole. I approached the chair. This time, I didn't sit. I knelt beside it and whispered, "You're not real. You're just where we put the pain when we can't carry it." The house trembled. Cracks split across the walls. The air grew cold, Dot, not in temperature, but in feeling. Like I had insulted a god, Dot, I stood. And I spoke louder. "You are the place we go when we can't forgive ourselves." The rocking chair began to burn, Dot, no fire. No flames, Dot, just disintegration, Dot, dust, unraveling into salt. The woman screamed, not aloud, but inside my skull. A scream of endings, of desperate memories clinging to meaning. I didn't run. I watched her collapse. I watched every version of me flicker out until there was only silence, not the kind that suffocates, the kind that frees. And when I stepped outside, there was no door, Dot, no house, Dot, only the beach, Dot, and morning. Clear sky, Dot, no tide, Dot, no wind, Dot, just me, Dot, whole, Dot, breathing, Dot, and for the first time in my life, at peace. Final reflection for narrator's closing. Some stories don't end with screams or blood or fire. Some stories end quietly, with a choice, with an understanding, and a chair left empty, Dot. But if you ever feel like something is watching you when you walk past a beach house, if the tide feels like it knows your name, if a rocking chair moves when no one's near, walk away, because not every house is haunted by the dead. Some are haunted by what the living refuse to release, Dot, and sometimes what's waiting inside is you. Beach house horror story. Continuous, emotional and intense. I arrived on a Monday. That much I'm sure of. The air was thick with brine and something else I couldn't place, like burnt rosemary or forgotten perfume. The beach house stood at the end of the bay, where the shoreline curved inward like a secret. The sky was dull, bruised with clouds, and the ocean hummed like it remembered something painful. I'd never met my grandmother, never even seen a photograph of her. My mother only mentioned her once, during a fever when she'd whispered, "Don't let the house in." Then she died, and weeks later, a lawyer called me. "You're the last blood," he'd said, "not the last relative, not the next of kin, the last blood." I remember that phrase because it didn't feel figurative. The house came with stipulations. I couldn't sell it. I had to stay for at least 1 week. 1 full week inside. No exceptions. The will specified it clearly, and the lawyer, an old man with watery eyes and shaking hands, repeated it like a prayer. 7 nights, doors locked, no leaving until the final morning tide. I laughed at it, Dot, until I saw the house, Dot. It wasn't abandoned. Not exactly. The paint was peeling. Yes, the windows fogged. But the air around it felt ... occupied. The way an old theater feels, long after the actors have gone, but the curtains still move on their own. I stepped inside, and the wind stopped. Slowed, stopped. The silence that followed was thick, almost gelatinous. I stood in the entryway with my bags at my feet, staring at dust dancing in columns of gray light. The floorboards under me gave a soft groan, like they were waking up. I told myself I was tired, that I was being dramatic. I explored, the living. Room smelled like salt and lavender. A rocking chair faced the sea. The walls were lined with books, some so swollen with moisture they looked like they'd been dredged up from the deep. The kitchen was small but clean. The table set for two, plates pristine, silverware gleaming. Napkins folded into swans. I stood. There, heart-hammering. No one had been in this house for years. That's what they said. Then who had set the table? I didn't eat. I chose a bedroom on the second floor one, with a balcony that opened toward the sea. The sheets were crisp. The pillows fluffed. A mint rested on the center of the comforter. It should have been funny. It wasn't. Lay down that night and listen to the waves. They didn't sound right. Not like waves. More like breathing. Slow. Rhythmic. Familiar. I closed my eyes when I opened them. It was dark, and the room had changed. Not dramatically. Subtly. The walls looked closer. The window was sealed shut, though I remembered it open. The rocking chair, because now one sat in the corner, creaked once and stopped. I checked my phone for the time. It read Tuesday, 3:13 a.m. That was fine. Until I checked again 5 hours later. Still Tuesday. Still 3:13 a.m. I stared at the phone for what felt like an hour, its pale glow casting long, distorted shadows across the wooden ceiling above me. Still Tuesday. Still 3:13 a.m. The minute never ticked. The screen never changed. The room around me was silent, save for the occasional groan of the old house settling. But it didn't feel like settling. It felt like breathing, like something enormous and patient and waiting was coiled just beneath the floorboards, syncing its inhales with mine. I got up. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to prove I still had agency, that the house hadn't closed over me like a mouth. The hallway outside my room was longer than I remembered. I hadn't noticed it the night before. There were more doors now, each identical, each with a brass knob and a number carved into the frame. But there were no lights. The darkness was perfect, unbroken. And yet, I could see. Not with my eyes, but with memory. I recognized the pattern. In the wallpaper, roses, blue, the exact same wallpaper from my childhood bedroom one I hadn't seen in decades. One that belonged in a tiny third-floor apartment in Maryland, not a sea-warped house on the edge of the Atlantic. I opened the first door. It led to my grandmother's kitchen. Not this house. Her other house, the one I'd never seen, I recognized. It instinctively, the smell of boiled onions, the chipped ceramic rooster on the shelf, the ticking of a clock that had no hands. A woman stood at the sink, back to me, humming a melody I had never heard, but somehow knew. She turned. She had no face, only a smooth canvas of skin, stretched tight like wax. I slammed the door. Heart thundering, I stumbled backward into the hall and reached for my phone. Still Tuesday. Still 3:13 a.m. I tried to scream, but the house caught the sound in its throat and swallowed it. I could feel the walls tighten. I ran. Downstairs, the layout had changed. The kitchen was now a library. The couch was gone, replaced with two high-backed chairs and a tea set that steamed gently. A portrait hung above the fireplace. Now, it was me, older, hollow-eyed, wearing a dress. I didn't own and holding a book I'd never written. The title was Burned into the Leather, the Version of You That Stayed. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I turned. No one, but the rocking chair was in motion. And this time, I was sure I hadn't touched it. I approached it slowly, knees trembling, skin buzzing. With static. The chair was old oak, dark-stained, smoothed by generations of hands and hours of sitting. As it rocked, it let out a sound like breath through rotted teeth. Beneath it, something shimmered. A crack in the floor. And through that crack. Light. No, not light. Water. dot glowing, pulsing, blue dot like the ocean at night, phosphorescent and alive. Knelt and peered into the gap. Beneath the floorboards of the beach house was an entire sea. Vast, endless, and in its depths houses. Dozens, hundreds, all identical, all glowing faintly. All occupied. People floated through their windows. Some screamed, some wept, some stared blankly at invisible televisions, or meals that would never rot. And each house had a chair, and in each chair, a shadow, the same shape, always. The same. I stood. Too fast. The room spun. The portrait above the fireplace changed. It now showed me sitting in the rocking chair. Eyes black. Mouth open in a scream I hadn't yet made. I ran to the front door. It didn't open. There was no knob anymore, only a peephole. I looked through it. On the other side stood myself. Smiling. Holding the key. And behind her, the beach. The sky. The tide. Time. I collapsed against the wall, sobbing. Somewhere upstairs, a music box began to play. Notes warped by age and salt. I climbed the staircase like a condemned soul. The hallway was shorter now. The doors gone, only one. Room remained. The attic. I opened the hatch. Inside, a bed, a mirror, a desk, a calendar pinned to the wall. I ran to it. The dates were scratched out. All but one. Tuesday. No month. No year. Just Tuesday. Below it, a note in familiar handwriting. My handwriting. You'll forget. That's part of it. The forgetting keeps the house alive. I dropped the note. In the mirror. I saw someone else. Me. But not me. Eyes wide. Hollow. Hair damp. Lips whispering something over and over. Too fast to follow. I reached out, touched the glass, and she touched back, but her skin was cold, and wet, and real. My hand didn't pass through the mirror. It didn't touch glass. It touched something. Soft, cold, human. The reflection of me wasn't mimicking. She moved independently. She studied me with sorrowful eyes that had no shine, like something behind them had already died. Her lips moved again, slower now. I could finally hear the words. Don't trust the sunrise. The attic light flickered, not like electricity, but like candlelight struggling in wind. The reflection vanished. The mirror was just a mirror again. My hand was dry. My breath was shallow. I backed away and bumped into the desk. It groaned beneath my weight, and a drawer slid open on its own. Inside was a key. Old, iron, heavy, attached. To it was a note, scrawled in that same handwriting. You'll need this to leave, but only after you remember. I didn't want to remember. Not anymore, but something inside me was beginning to stir. Memories that weren't mine, at least not from this life. A beach I'd never visited. A sister I'd never known. A girl, maybe 9 or 10, standing at the edge of the waves, calling my name with a voice like fog. The image flashed in my head so vividly, I nearly fell. I left the attic. The house had changed again. No stairs, only a spiral ramp, downward, lined with oil lamps that hadn't been lit moments before. The walls dripped with condensation. Carvings had appeared, etched into the plaster. Symbols I didn't recognize, but understood. They weren't language. They were memory. Each one triggered something. A scream I'd made in my sleep as a child. Sound of a man's voice I'd never met but missed. The smell of seaweed wrapped around bare ankles. The taste of iron and salt in my mouth. I descended the ramp. My feet moved slower with each turn, as if the house were winding time tighter, trying to squeeze the last seconds out of the clock. I lost track of how many circles I made. 10, 20, 100. Eventually, I reached the door. It was made of driftwood, rotted in places, but strong. The key fit without resistance. I turned it. It opened into a basement made of sand. No walls, no ceiling. Just dunes stretching endlessly in every direction. Beneath a sky I couldn't see. And in the middle, a table. Set for 3. 2 seats occupied. 1 by a child. Pale, hair matted, legs swinging beneath the chair. The other, by the woman from the mirror. But this time I knew her. Her name surfaced with the force of a wave. Maeve. My sister. But I'd never had a sister, had I? She smiled, and it cracked something inside me open. Something fragile and terrified. I waited, she said softly. You promised you'd come back before the tide turned. I didn't know. I stammered. You forgot, the child said. Everyone forgets. That's how the house wins. I looked around. There was no door behind me anymore. No key, no handle. Just sand, shifting slowly like something underneath was moving. What is this place? I asked. Maeve touched the tablecloth. It's the waiting room. For what? For your memory. I shook my head. I don't want it. But it was already happening. The sand around my feet curled upward like smoke. It wrapped my ankles. My calves, not dragging guiding. And with every grain that touched me, I saw more. A beach trip when I was 4. A game of hide and seek in a house that wasn't ours. Maeve hiding beneath the porch. A storm rolling in. Me. Leaving. Forgetting. Erasing. She had knocked. She had screamed. But the tide was louder. And when I returned, hours later, the house was gone. So was she. Or so I had told myself. But the truth? I had never gone back. I had never told anyone. I buried it. Let time bleach the guilt out of me. Until the house called me home. Maeve stood and took my hand. I forgive you, she said. But I didn't deserve it. Not yet. The child smiled too. Then turned to dust. Gently. Silently. In the wind. Returned. Not through the dunes, but from above. A new hatch opened in the ceiling. If this place had a ceiling. Light poured through. Not sunlight. Moonlight. It touched the sand and the entire space shifted upward like an elevator, made of dreams. The next floor was the dining room again, but it was drowned. Water reached my chest. Warm and pulsing. Furniture floated slowly in lazy spirals. The walls breathed, and the chandelier dripped sea foam. On the far end of the room. The rocking chair, but it wasn't rocking. It was. Listening. I approached. The closer I got, the more. Water soaked my skin, but I didn't resist. When I reached it, I saw the final note. You'll leave only when the house remembers you too. Then the chair turned on its own. Just once. And the floor gave way. Fell for hours. Or maybe seconds. That time had no weight here, only motion. The plunge didn't feel like falling through air. It felt like falling through thought. Through memory. Through guilt that had been compressed into physical space. My lungs didn't burn. My heart didn't race. But something inside me older than bone ached with recognition. When I hit the ground, it wasn't ground. It was carpet. Warm. Brown. Familiar. The living room of the house I grew up in. I sat upright, gasping, expecting water, salt, shadow. Instead, there was sunlight pouring through the window, birdsong outside, and the soft ticking of a grandfather. Clock in the corner. My mother appeared in the doorway. Alive. Young. Wearing her old summer robe. Hair up in a messy bun. She looked at me the way she did when I was a child waking from nightmares calm. Full of warmth, with just enough fear behind her eyes to let me know she felt things for me. Bad dream? She asked. I couldn't speak. At first. Tears rolled down my cheeks, slow and hot. This wasn't right. She was gone. Bed has been for years, but this felt real. The softness in her voice. The smell of chamomile and fresh laundry. The crease between her brows. Everything. What day is it? I asked, finally. She tilted her head, smiled. You know what day it is. I didn't. I truly didn't. She stepped closer. I stepped back, and that's when the shadows shifted. Her feet weren't touching the floor. Not really. They hovered just above it, imperceptible, but enough. Her smile cracked slightly, not broken, just strained, like someone trying to remember how lips are supposed to curve. I missed you, she said, and her voice doubled. Once from her mouth, once from the ceiling, then again, from under the floor, then again, from inside me. I turned. The walls bent inward, not collapsed, curved, like the ribs of a massive beast. The grandfather clock began ticking faster, then backward, then faster again. I stumbled into the hallway, where the beach should have been, but the door opened into the ocean, not onto it. Into it, as if the house was submerged beneath the surface, sealed in a glass bottle, and beyond that glass, the sea boiled with lives I'd almost lived. A wedding I never had, a child I never carried, a woman I never became. Each floated past, touching. The windows with ghostly hands, eyes pleading. One pressed her forehead against the glass and mouthed, "Let me in." I turned away because I knew the truth now. This house, it was not haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by me. By every path I abandoned, every person I chose not to become, every memory I rewrote. I had buried Maeve in the folds of my mind, and this house had been built on the graves of all the truths I refused to remember. When I returned to the staircase, it was gone. In its place, a ladder, rusty, wet, reaching down, not up. At the bottom, a single door. Old, swollen from damp. No knob. Just a mirror, and in the mirror, I saw her again. Maeve. But not the ghostly figure from before. This was her as she had been, 10 years old, barefoot, bruised knees. That soft, permanent frown she wore when she didn't understand something. Her voice came from the mirror, not her mouth. "You're almost there," she whispered. "But you haven't seen the worst." "I don't want to," I whispered back. "I know," she said, "but it's yours. It's always been." The door behind the mirror creaked open on its own. Inside, a nursery, tiny crib, peeling with seahorses and stars. A mobile spun in slow, unnatural circles above the empty bed. On the rocking chair, and much older, eyes blank, hair gray, rocking slowly, hands folded in my lap. And on my lap, a bundle, wrapped in cloth. Still. I didn't want to know, but I stepped forward. The room pulsed with lightless energy. The older me didn't look up, didn't move, but she whispered, "This is the version where you stayed forever. The version where you never remembered. The version where you became the house." My throat closed. The bundle in her arms shifted. A soft sound, a baby, maybe, or a seagull, or something else. Something wet. When she finally raised her head, her eyes were completely black. No iris, no white, just ocean. Deep. Endless. Drowning. And I knew then, this was the house's heart. It didn't want to hurt me. It wanted me to choose it. To sit. To rock. To stay. And it would give me peace. Forge to fulness. And I was so tired. So heavy with remembering. But Maeve's voice returned. "You promised you'd come back before the tide turned. You didn't, but you can still keep part of the promise. You can still leave." The older me held out the bundle. Her mouth opened, and instead of a word, water poured out. Gallons. Flooding the floor. I took a step back. Then another. She stood. The chair rocked on its own. She followed me. Slow, steady. The flood rose. The wallpaper dissolved, and I turned running through corridors that now had no end. No corners, just curve after curve of salt-soaked memory, until the light came. Door dot at the farthest point. Behind it, sunrise dot real dot maybe dot hopefully dot. On the threshold, Maeve, but older now, 17, maybe dot hair long, eyes steady. You can go, she said. I don't deserve to. I know, but you're still giving me a way out? Yes. Why? Because someone gave me one. Once. And she turned, walked into the darkness. I stepped into the light, and the tide stopped. The light didn't burn, Dot. It didn't blind. That it wrapped me, Dot, not like sunlight. Not like fire, like memory finally letting go of its grip. The house didn't scream as I left. It didn't try to stop me. It simply sighed, like it had been waiting for centuries to exhale. The tide stopped at my ankles. The porch was dry. The sky was pink and soft with early morning. Seagulls cried above, but not mournfully. Just dot, dot, dot normally. I turned back, half expecting the house to vanish, or collapse, or transform into something monstrous. Dot, it didn't. Dot, it stood still. Dot, quiet. Dot, almost kind. The front door closed on its own, gently. The windows fogged over, and then a breeze came and carried the scent of lavender and salt through the air, familiar, but not haunting. I walked Dot away from the house, back toward the cliffside path that had brought me here what felt like years ago. But something stopped me after 20 steps. A thought, a whisper, a question that wouldn't let go. Had I really left? I checked my phone. Dot, it was Wednesday, 6:42 a.m. The date made sense. The sky made sense. Even my body bruised, sore, soaked felt right. And yet, my shadow was gone. I looked down at the sand. The sun was behind me, but no shadow followed. The weight hit me slow, like cold setting into bones. Dot, something stayed behind. Or maybe something came with me. Dot, I got in the car that was still parked where I left it, tires crusted with dried salt, windshield wipers corroded. The keys were still in my coat pocket, and the engine turned over without protest. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I drove, mile after mile, past places that felt too empty, people walking dogs who never looked up, stoplights that stayed green. Just long enough. Dot, silence hung over the world like something unfinished. When I reached the city, things returned to normal. Dot, or something pretending to be normal. Dot, my apartment was untouched. Dot, my neighbors waved. I returned to work, answered emails, smiled when people asked if I'd had a nice vacation. But I kept checking the date, every hour, every day. Dot, just to be sure, because part of me still didn't believe I'd made it out. Dot, and on the 7th night back, it happened. I woke at 3:13. Got Dot to sound, not to movement. Dot, to stillness. Dot, too perfect, like the world was holding its breath again. I walked to the window. The moon was gone. Clouds pressed against the glass like fogged lungs. Dot, and in the corner of my bedroom, dot, 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 a chair. Dot, wooden. Dot, old. Dot, gripping. Dot, no one sat in it. Yet it rocked. Dot, just once. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just watched. And I realized then the house never needed to keep me within its walls. Dot, it just needed a piece of me. A name. A memory. Dot, a shadow. And now it had one. Dot, days passed. I stopped sleeping. Dot, time turned soft again. Sometimes I'd blink and it would be evening. Sometimes I'd forget what day it was entirely, but I never forgot Tuesday. Tried to throw the chair out, burned it, smashed it, left it on the side of the highway. But every night at 3:13 a.m., it returned. Dot, dry sometimes, soaked others. Dot, always silent. Dot, always watching. And each time it came back, something else left me. A favorite memory. Dot, a song. I loved. Dot, my sister's voice. The chair was feeding not on fear, on identity, on story, on me. One night, I sat in it, not because I wanted to, because I was too tired not to. The chair sighed beneath me, like an old friend, and the world around me shifted just slightly. The walls bent, the air thickened, and I heard the ocean again, not the one outside, the one beneath. Rising, welcoming. A knock came at the door. Soft, rhythmic. 3 slow taps. I didn't answer, but I stood, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. On the other side, the sea. Calm. Still. And just beyond it, the house. Lit. Alive. And Maeve, standing on the porch. Holding the bundle. She smiled at me, not in warning. In forgiveness, then turned, opened the door, and walked inside. The rocking chair behind me creaked. The clock read 3:13, and outside, the waves whispered a name that sounded like mine. Asterisk, some houses don't trap you with locks or chains. They trap you with truth. With the parts of you you buried so deep you forgot they ever breathed. And when they call you back, it's never to punish. It's to remind, to feed, to remember you into existence. I left the house, but I left the door open. And some nights, if you listen close, you'll hear it too. Not the wind, not the tide, but the creak of a chair, and the voice of a girl asking, "Do you remember what day it is?" I was 32 when I agreed to spend the off-season guarding Sea Glass Point, an abandoned children's retreat stranded on a sandbar that appears only at low tide. The real estate firm called it caretaking. Locals called it cursed. To me, it was 3 months of solitude, a pocket of time to outrun divorce papers, and the voice of my mother asking why I always choose places that do not want me. Low tide exposed a rough, shimmering roadway of crushed shells. I drove across at dusk, the ocean retreating on either side like curtains pulled by invisible hands. Behind me the mainland lights blinked out one by one until only the lantern strapped to my roof kept shape in the growing dark. Sea Glass Point wasn't a house, more a small colony. 4 clapboard dormitories, a mess hall, a chapel without pews, and at its heart a sprawling Victorian manor that wore the wind like a shroud. Every pane of glass looked cataracted, as if the building had forgotten how to see. My job was simple: keep vandals out, keep pipes from bursting, log daily weather, survive until spring buyers came to flatten the lot into luxury condos. 3 months. An ocean sigh. My first step onto the gravel drive sounded louder than it should have, like the ground remembered boots. I hauled my duffel to the manor's porch. The key from the firm slid into the lock. No resistance, almost eager. Inside, the air tasted of iodine and old chalk. Rows of children's drawings still clung to the foyer walls, mostly suns and boats, but some done in frantic charcoal showed black eyes staring from beneath waves. Set up camp in the caretaker's quarters on the 3rd floor, a narrow room with a dormer window aimed at the horizon. By the time I unrolled my sleeping bag, night had swallowed the waterway. The tide wouldn't return high enough to cross until morning. I was, for the first time in my life, genuinely alone. Or so I thought. Just after 2 in the morning, a sound stirred me. Chalk scraping slate. The manor contained no chalkboards, at least none I'd seen. Yet the noise was unmistakable, rhythmic, patient. I followed it barefoot, flashlight dancing across corridors where paint curled like dead leaves. The beam found the chapel door. Ajar. Inside, moonlight spilled through a rose window, illuminating a single object at the altar, a child's school slate propped on a rust-stained lectern. Fresh white lines stretched across its surface unsteady, as if drawn by small, determined hands. 3 words, "Stay until DAW." My breath iced the air. Another line etched itself while I watched. chalk lifting and dragging as though clutched by. Invisible fingers. Don't let them eeny backed away, heart hammering. A board groaned behind me. I spun my like nothing but pewless shadows. Yet the slate scratched on, louder, faster, until the words blurred into white noise. I slammed the chapel door and fled upstairs, ears ringing. At dawn I forced myself. Back to the chapel. The slate was gone. In its place lay a single seashell, spiral cracked, edges slick with something dark that wasn't quite water. Outside, gulls circled low, silent. Tuesday, the second night, brought rain-hard, wind-driven, lashing the manor like fists. Sometime after midnight, the fire alarm in dormitory 2 shrieked alive. I crossed the courtyard through horizontal sheets of salt, kicked in the swollen door, and found the common room bone-dry, fireless. Yet every bunk mattress dripped red water onto the floorboards, forming the shape of tidal pools. At their centers, small handprints. The alarm stopped the moment I stepped. Inside, lightning skated across windows. For a breath, I saw silhouettes. Children, dozens. Faces pressed to glass from the outside, though we were 3 floors up. When the flash died, the panes were empty, but condensation spelled a single sentence across them all, backwards from my side. The tide forgets nitrogen monoxide. Only Wednesday storm clouds lingered. Footsteps woke me light, many, scuttling along the attic overhead. I climbed the ladder, pushing the hatch with the butt of my flashlight. Dust spiraled. The only occupants, 7 weather vanes stacked like crosses along the rafters, each engraved with a child's name and date, year after year. Ending 1978, the season, the retreat, lost funding, according to the firms. Brochure. Wind hissed through cracked slate tiles, spinning the vanes just enough to make them sing. A high metallic whine that rose and fell like distant playground laughter. I descended, shoved a dresser across the hatch, and whispered nonsense to calm the air inside my lungs. Thursday low tide arrived 2 hours later than the charts predicted. I should have driven to town for supplies, but somewhere between thought and muscle, the decision vanished. Instead, I paced the property, taking photographs for my log. Inspecting the east dormitory, I found a Polaroid pinned to a bulletin board new, edges still curling. It showed the manor's foyer as viewed from the top of the stairs. In the photo, a man in rain gear stood at the bottom, staring up with hollow eyes. Over his shoulder, a dozen children in lifeguard uniforms watched, smiles too wide. I hadn't taken that picture. A shrill bell rang from the mess hall kitchen, the dinner bell campers once used. It rang 7 times, paused, rang 3. On its final note, every door in the compound slammed open hundreds at once in applause of rot and wind. I ran until my lungs shredded, back to the caretaker room, where I barricaded myself behind furniture and fear. Night fell without stars. Friday. Baby sleep fractured into glass shards of dream. Gulls with children's faces pecking limestone cliffs. Waves coughing up school desks. The manor marching on crab legs into the sea. When I jerked awake, the dormer window was pulsing glass, bowing inward then relaxing, like respiration. On the inside of the pane, a new Polaroid was taped. The chapel. Altar, lit by candles, circle of children around the slate. My own body lay across the lectern, eyes stitched shut with kelp. Behind the photo, written directly on the glass in brine, low tide opens more than Rhodesy tore it down, but the words remained, burned into the frost. I didn't open the window. I couldn't. Every instinct in me screamed that to open it, just once, was to let something in that would never leave. The kind of thing that doesn't knock, doesn't ask, doesn't speak. It just sits, watches, waits for your back to turn. I taped the blanket over the dormer, stuffed towels into its frame, and dragged the heaviest chair in the room up against it. It creaked all night in the silence, not moving, not speaking, but somehow listening. I didn't sleep by morning. The tide had withdrawn further than I'd ever seen. The road back to the mainland was exposed bare, white, wide. Too wide. Stood at the edge of the sandbar, keys in hand, staring down the ghost road that twisted toward Freedom. And then I saw them children, just at the very end of the path, where the sea still kissed the horizon. 12 of them, standing side by side, staring. Too far to see their faces. But I didn't need to. I'd seen them before, not in memory. In dreams. In Polaroids. Their presence reached me like cold fingers brushing the back of my neck. When I blinked, they were gone. But the road looked wrong now longer than before. Narrower. And the sky had turned cloudy, though no clouds had passed above me. I turned back, because something deep inside had shifted. The road out was no longer escape, it was invitation. And I wasn't ready to know what waited at the end. That day, I found a journal in the Manors library, beneath loose floorboards warped with salt. A caretaker's log name illegible. Dated 1977. The final entry read, "The kids aren't sick. They're changing. They know the tide better than I do now. They whisper to it. They feed it names. I can hear them in the pipes at night. I think they're learning how to come back." I read it 3 times. The ink faded more each time, like it wanted to disappear. That night, I locked every door, every window, even the chapel. And still at 3:13 a.m., something knocked on the front door. Not hard, not frantic. Just soft. Polite. 3 short taps, followed by a whisper through the keyhole. "Is there room for one more?" I didn't answer. I didn't breathe. Whisper came again. Different voice. Younger. "I was here before you." Then silence. But I couldn't move for nearly an hour. And when I finally did, the door was ajar. Just an inch. Enough for cold air to seep through. Enough to change everything. I didn't see what opened it. I just saw what it left behind. A child's shoe. Filled with water. And something still wriggling inside. Saturday of. Stopped writing the date. It doesn't hold meaning anymore. The sun rises, but it doesn't warm. The moon moves, but never sets. The tide no longer matches the charts. I don't know how long I've been here. The chapel slate returned, propped. In the center of my room. With one word. Soon. Later that night, I followed the sound of humming. It echoed across the property like wind trapped in a bottle. High-pitched, fragile. It led me to dormitory 4. I found a bed made with fresh linens embroidered with tiny sailboats. And on the pillow, a set of baby teeth, arranged in a smile. When I turned to run, every bunk creaked in unison. No one in them. Just the dent of bodies long vanished. I fled to the kitchen. The mess hall clock was moving backwards. Tray was set for 12. Boiled on the stove with no fire beneath it. And above the sink, a mirror reflected not my face, but the sea. Storming. Spinning. Rising. I touched the glass, and it was wet. The water on the mirror didn't dry. I wiped it 3 times, using the sleeve of my jacket, then a towel, then the hem of a curtain I tore from the mess hall window. But every time I looked again, the glass wept. Quiet, steady streams down its surface like tears. And beneath those droplets, not my face, never my face, but the tide, oiling under moonlight, and shapes that never fully surfaced. I tried to break it. I swung the skillet. Full force. The impact rattled my teeth. The mirror didn't crack. It rippled. Then still. And left a message, etched in reverse. You are the tide now. I left the kitchen with salt on my lips and blood on my hands. Not mine, not this time. Something had changed since the night of the knock. Something had entered. Not just the house. Me. I began to forget things. What day it was. What I'd eaten last. My mother's voice. My name. In moments. But I remembered the children. Vividly. Too vividly. I saw them now, even when I closed my eyes. Pale. Wet. Faces split in two wide grins. Or blank, as if someone had started sketching a child and stopped halfway through the eyes. They came during the quiet hours. They left footprints in the sand, across the third floor hallway. They whispered stories in the pipes. They scratched the floor, beneath my bed with fingers that didn't stop bleeding. And one by one, they began appearing in the Polaroids I didn't take. I found one taped to the chapel door. It showed me, asleep. In the caretaker's bed, with something standing at the foot of it. Long limbs, drenched hair, head tilted too far. Arms full of children's shoes. On the back, a note. It's your turn to sing. I ripped it up, but the next night, the chapel organ began to play on its own. Just 3 notes, over and over, until I screamed. And even then, it didn't stop. The next morning, if you can still call it that. I went back to the tide road. It was gone. Not covered, not hidden. Gone. The water was still, flat as glass, but beneath it, no sandbar. No road. No mainland. Just more water. And shadows. Hundreds of them. Drifting in slow circles like fish that had once been children, or children that had become something else. When I stepped back, I heard. Someone laughed behind me. I turned. One of the dormitories had collapsed, burned from the inside. Ash drifted in slow motion. And from within the wreckage, a child's voice called, "We're almost ready." Later that day, if it was day, I saw myself. Standing in the courtyard, wearing clothes I hadn't worn yet, holding something wrapped in canvas. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. But when I stepped forward, it did too. Perfectly. Mirror. Like. And when I spoke, it raised its hand to its lips and whispered, "She." Then dissolved into water. The puddle it left behind steamed in the cold air. Inside it, floating, another Polaroid, a close-up of the slate in the chapel. The words now read, "Remember what you did? I haven't eaten in days, but I'm not hungry. Haven't slept, but I keep dreaming. I walk the halls at night, and the portraits on the walls no longer show children. They show me. Dozens of me. Living here, teaching here, praying here, some smiling, some hollow. One sitting in the chapel, cradling the slate in her lap, whispering to it like a lover. Her mouth shaped my name, but her eyes were wrong. They were filled with water. And came the day I opened a door that shouldn't exist. In the basement, beneath the chapel, a stone door, carved into the foundation. Half submerged. Cold to the touch. It opened when I whispered, "I'm sorry." Inside, stairs, not built. Carved. Spiraling down through wet rock that smelled like old sleep and salt. I descended. No light, only breath, only memory. At the bottom, a room. Circular. Walls lined with names, etched by fingernails. By teeth. By chalk made from bone. In the center, a pool. Still. And deep. And black. I leaned over it and saw her. Maeve. The name surfaced without invitation. The girl I never saved. The cousin I let drown one summer at age 11. The reason I don't go near the ocean. The reason I came here in the first place. She opened her mouth and salt poured out. Her hand reached from the water and held my wrist. Not to pull. To anchor. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, because I remembered. Finally. And the pool whispered, "Now you're part of the tide too." Maeve's hand didn't pull me under. It held me there, just below the surface of that still black water, as if to say, "Look longer." The moment her fingers closed around my wrist, the water changed. not in color, but in temperature. It warmed not physically, but emotionally, like recognition, like grief shared. And the surface, it vanished. There was no more room, Dot, no more ceiling, Dot, only images flickering and sharp rushing, past like film reels jammed into a projector powered by memory. And guilt. I was back at the lake, 9 years old. Maeve behind me, small feet dancing on the dock, shouting, "Watch this!" I hadn't watched. I'd turned away to pick wild blueberries. And when I came back, the dock was empty. Only her shoes remained, and the water, Dot, still Dot mocking Dot. I never told anyone. They said she wandered off into the woods, disappeared. But I knew. Always knew, Dot, and now, somehow, the house knew too, Dot. It had been calling her this whole time. Or maybe she'd been calling me. I came back to myself kneeling beside the pool, her hand gone, the room empty, but not silent. A low hum faint beneath the earth. A tide in the bones of the manor. A lullaby, almost. I climbed the stairs, legs weak, soaked with water that evaporated before it reached the top step. When I emerged back into the chapel basement, the air was different, Dot dry, Dot warm, Dot welcoming, Dot the slate sat on the altar again. But this time it held only one phrase. We remember you. I fell to my knees, not from fear, from reliefs. I understood then. The children weren't haunting the house. They were the house. Each creak a laugh, each shadow a sigh. Each tide a name whispered one final time, Dot. And now they knew mine. That night, I didn't try to run. I didn't bar the doors. I sat in the rocking chair at the window and waited for them, Dot, at 3:13 a.m. They came, one by one, out of the sea, footprints wet and soft across the sand, small forms moving like fog. They didn't knock. This time, they walked through the walls like mist re-entering air, and circled. Dot silent, Dot some held Polaroids, some held shells. One placed a crumpled drawing in my lap, Dot. It showed me Dot smiling, Dot holding hands with a group of children, whose eyes were hollow and endless. Above the drawing was a title, Field Trip Forever. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I was in the chapel, but not alone. Benches lined the space now, filled with figures, Dot wet, pale, familiar, Dot all facing forward, all staring at the slate, Dot. It had changed again. Now, it simply said, "Do you accept?" My voice didn't work, but I nodded, Dot, not in surrender, Dot in understanding, Dot in remorse. The slate wiped itself clean, Dot, and a bell rang, Dot soft, Dot somewhere far below the floor, Dot the next morning. I woke in my bed, Dot dry, Dot warm, Dot birds chirped. The dormer window let in gentle light. I thought briefly, was it all a dream? Until I stepped outside, Dot, and saw the road, Dot clear, Dot solid, Dot, leading back to the mainland, Dot, and at the edge of it, a car, Dot mine, Dot untouched, Dot keys in the ignition, Dot engine warm, Dot it shouldn't have been possible. I knew the house had let me go, for now. Left without a bag, only the drawing in my pocket. Didn't look back, not once. But even as the tires touched pavement again and town signs reappeared, I carried them with me, Dot the children, the tide, the truth, Dot Maeve, Dot back home. I tried to forget again. Forgetting didn't feel like peace anymore, Dot. It felt like betrayal. I kept the slate beside my bed, Dot. It stayed blank. For a week, Dot, 2, Dot, then one morning. 3 new words. IT's almost time. The slate never left my knitstand. After I returned from Sea Glass Point, I moved through the world like a shadow, pretending to be solid. I spoke to people, answered emails, went back to work. But everything sounded like it came from underwater. I smiled when I was supposed to. I even laughed once, but something inside me had shifted. Not broken, Dot, shifted, Dot tilted. toward something older than language, older than me. Every night I checked the slate. Most nights it remained blank, the chalk untouched dot until it WASN, single quotes T. One morning. Just past mid-April, the words reappeared. She's waiting at low tide. No name, but I knew Maeve. The house had given me time. Time to remember. Time to regret. Time to decide. I could ignore the call. I could lock the slate in a drawer, throw it in the sea, move inland, surround myself with asphalt and silence. But that would not stop the tide. It would come for me eventually. So I packed a bag, drove back down the coast. Told no one. At dawn, I stood at the edge of the waterway that led to Sea Glass Point. The road was dry. Sea parted. Sky pale, exactly like it had been the first time. But I was different. I crossed without hesitation. The air changed halfway across. Heavier. Wetter. The kind of air that remembers what you've done. The compound looked untouched. No graffiti. No rot. Just wind blown. Empty. Expectant. The manor's front door stood open. No sound came from inside. Birds overhead. Only that familiar hush. The hush that always came before something remembered your name. I walked the halls. The walls had changed. No drawings. No photographs. Just mirrors. Dozens of them. And in each my reflection. But not from today. Versions of me from other moments. Younger. Older. Some smiling. Some staring blankly. One sobbing. One whispering something I couldn't hear. I passed them all and entered the chapel. The pews were full again. The children had returned. Some faces I recognized. Some I didn't. They didn't speak. They didn't blink. They simply turned their heads in perfect unison toward the altar, where Maeve waited. Older now, maybe 15, maybe more, hair dripping, but her smile real. Gentle. Forgiving. On the slate, a single sentence: we want to go home. I stepped forward, knees weak, hands shaking. What do you want me to do? I asked. Maeve tilted her head. Stay, she said. Not to trap me. To punish me. To complete the circle. To finish the memory. To let them rest. You mean die? I asked. She shook her head. Be here. The house pulsed. Around me. The chapel began to dissolve. Not crumble. Not collapse, but soften. The way dreams dissolve when you wake. The pews faded. The windows brightened. The children rose, one by one, and walked toward the sea, out the door, into the mist. No words. No tears. Only footprints and silence. Maeve remained. She walked to me, small hand in mine. You stayed, she said. I'm sorry, I whispered. I know. And then she was gone too. Just like that. Now I sit in the chapel alone, but not empty. The tide comes and goes. The road appears and vanishes. Sometimes people arrive. Real estate agents, photographers, curious strangers. They never last long. The house doesn't hurt them. It shows them. It whispers to them. And then it forgets them. But it remembers me because I chose to remember it. The slate remains on the altar. Each day anew. Message. Sometimes in chalk. Sometimes in salt. Most recently, THE. Tide remembers who you saved. I don't know what that means yet, but I keep watching the shoreline. One day, maybe someone else will come. Someone like me, carrying grief like a second spine, carrying guilt like a scar across time. And when they do. I single quotes LLB here. Not to scare them. Not to keep them, but to guide them through. To remind them what memory means. Because some places don't haunt you. They hold you until you're ready to forgive yourself. And when that moment comes, the tide will carry you home. Final reflection. Narrator's last words. There, as a house by the water that breathes like a thing alive. It doesn't want blood. It wants memory. It wants truth. And if you listen close, just after dark, when the wind shifts and the tide recedes, you might hear a child's voice whisper, "It's your turn to remember."